Okay, so today our presentation is going to be on the apartheid in South Africa. So we chose this historical event as it sort of links in with us, and we've studied it before in our previous school. So we have a short video to show you, just to give you a bit more background about what it is before we go into more detail, so you can fully understand everything.
Apartheid in South Africa crumbled after Nelson Mandela walked to freedom, but black people suffered decades of government-backed injustice before it did. Apartheid really began in 1948, but separating black Africans from the white minority had long been a policy aim. Laws made white people officially superior, and the large black majority faced discrimination in every aspect of their lives. Living, doing business or owning land in white areas was banned. There were separate public facilities, transport and schools. Interracial marriage was banned. Many had no right to citizenship and were regarded as aliens in major cities. Instead, they were made citizens of Bantustans, homelands scattered throughout South Africa. But resistance grew. In 1960, a huge peaceful protest against past laws ended in a massacre at Sharpeville. 69 people were killed. The deaths galvanized opposition, radicalizing liberation movements like the ANC.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence.
Open conflict erupted in the 1980s, with anti-apartheid activists frequently shot at, beaten or arrested. Mass protests were firmly put down. But little by little, the apartheid establishment crumbled. After gradual reform, Nelson Mandela, imprisoned since not long after Sharpeville, was set free in 1990. 4 years later, he was elected as South Africa's first black president. Apartheid had ended.
Okay, so the decontextualization of our presentation. So these are the thoughts and questions we had while making the whole presentation. What evoked the apartheid to take place? So we know that it was it dates back to all when the Dutch and the English colonized South Africa, but they lived in peace up until 1948. So one of the main questions were, what actually sparked this to become a legal thing with rules segregating whites and blacks? How were the solutions found and how were they addressed? So this is another question. We were wondering what the actual, how solutions were found so that so that the country could break out of apartheid. So we know it was Nelson Mandela being released and Nelson Mandela becoming president and having the first black president, but maybe some more details. Then the next, why did the apartheid last so long? So it spanned all the way from 1948 to officially 1994. So people were okay with segregating and demeaning blacks for so long. And so one of our questions was, why did they let it go on for so long? Because most other historical events didn't last such a large period of time. How reliable is the information that is given to us about this event, and what are the limits to our knowledge about this subject? So we were wondering first of all, how reliable is the information that we're getting from the internet, because during that time, it's a bit biased because mostly the whites had access to giving information and the blacks were usually put down, and everyone was just really angry and things were very heated. So we want to know how much we can rely on this information to give us all the knowledge that we have about the subject now. More and more accounts are coming out more now from people's parents or from actual experiences, but from the very beginning we don't have a lot of real information that we can trust. So our knowledge question was, to what extent does the apartheid affect our views on the subject of racism today? So racism, as we know, is a very touchy or sensitive subject, and having large important historical events like the apartheid, how does that affect us today? Does it make us even more sensitive to racism, or does it maybe make us more comfortable speaking about it now that such a big event has happened? The areas of knowledge that we chose were, first of all, ethics, because obviously it's a really big ethical question of racism. It's just, when you think racism, you think what are the ethical issues behind it. Then history, of course, because this is a historical event, so it was an obvious choice. Then the ways of knowing was sense of perception, because we can, through looking at this event, so the apartheid, we can sense different things, and it's given us more knowledge that we can perceive and see the apartheid from different points of views. Reason, because we're able to reason with information, and we're able to use our thoughts with the information to try and gain more knowledge. And emotion, because it's a very emotional subject, and the more you dig deeper into what actually happened in the apartheid, you'll see how sad or emotional it actually is, because it's quite upsetting. Many things you look at to do with this is very upsetting because of how more delicate the subject is and how everyone handled it.
So our first area of knowledge claim is that the ethics of racism in England and Holland were brought to South Africa through the colonization. So South Africa was colonized much before the apartheid, which was in the 1600s. But there was still a large influence from Holland and England over South Africa. And Holland and England had especially Holland had a lot of racism problems over the years, and had a large racial discrimination problem going on from mostly around the 1800s. And a lot of people in South Africa were influenced by those countries, and there was always a lot of racial tension between the whites and the blacks there. And the apartheid happened because of the buildup of tension from both things, from the buildup of tensions from the black and the white over the white believing that they should have more power than they are granted in South Africa. So it caused the apartheid. But our counterclaim for this would be that the colonization of South Africa by the Dutch and the English did not affect the ethnic views of racism in the country. And we decided to have this one because South Africa is, at the same time, by some people having an influence, mostly the politicians and the higher people in the country having the influence over Holland and England, it did not affect many of the views over racism in the general population, white or black, and it was just a build-up of tension over two different beliefs that clashed. Our first ways of knowledge claim would be the apartheid changed our sense of perception towards different races. And this is because during the apartheid there was a lot of tension between both races, and there was a lot of terrible things that happened, such as there were murders, people were getting arrested all the time, there was a large discrimination happening. And now at our time, if we look back into this, we are mostly ashamed of what happened, and it changed our sense of perception over. And in 1994, there was a change of sense of perception in South Africans, realizing they're equal people, realizing they're both the same in the end. And our counterclaim of this is our perceptions of different races weren't changed by the apartheid, and this is because we decided in this because at the same time, the apartheid did not affect the way we think about different races. It affects the way we think people in the past saw different races. It does not affect our personal knowledge about both races, and therefore it didn't really change our sense of perception over races didn't change because of the apartheid. Our second area of knowledge claim would be Europe's colonization over South Africa affected its history. And this one is linked to our counterclaim, which is South Africa's history stayed unaffected by the colonization of Europe. And this is because many people believe that as life goes, the history is made, or there's many people that believe that, or it can be believed that the history is already chosen for the person. So here we have the two different examples, because Europe's colonization over South Africa affected its history would be that South Africa was on a path, but when Europe arrived to South Africa and colonized the country, it changed the path and new history was being made. And with our counterclaim, it's that our knowledge would be that it was always meant for South Africa for that to happen. It was the same path it was supposed to take. The history stayed unchanged. Our second ways of knowledge claim would be our reasoning on the subject of racism caused the apartheid to last 46 years. And this is in the apartheid lasted mostly 46 years because of a lot of stubbornness from both sides, both wanting, the whites wanting to stay on top and the blacks wanting to be equal. And the reasoning of both sides made it last that long because they couldn't come to an agreement. And our counterclaim for this would be the human reasoning behind the apartheid did not affect the length. And this is because as the apartheid lasted as long because people were scared, maybe people were scared of change. The whites, they were scared of being equal to the same people, and it wasn't their reasoning, it was their fear of change that caused it to last that long, and for them to be so strongly holding on to their power.
And our third area of knowledge claim is history has showed us that the colonization of countries meant a large impact on the population of the country being colonized. So the statement, we have quite a few big examples that the colonization of countries has meant a big change in the population of the country and in the cultural and ethical parts of the population. For example, when there was the discovery of the indigenous people in the Americas, many things were brought to them as bad things. So the culture from Europe was brought to them and they were forced to take this culture, this new culture that was strange for them and new for them, and they probably didn't want to change it. And this was the same that happened in South Africa, because the people that were already in South Africa, the indigenous people, they were brought this change that they most likely didn't want to accept, and this caused the apartheid. And of course there was also racism, and that was also brought by the colonization from the British and Dutch. And the counterclaim would be the colonization of countries in past history showed us that new knowledge could be brought into the country. And because we know that in Europe was very advanced in the sphere of knowledge about different things, but also other countries contributed a lot into this knowledge that Europe had. And we know that in South Africa, both have contributed in some new kinds of knowledges that we also now use. So the apartheid might have not been only a bad thing, but also in the long term a good thing concerning all the new knowledge that could happen. Then our way of knowledge claim is the emotions of the people have helped in the election of Mandela. As we know, when the election of Mandela happened, this was the official end of the apartheid. And probably the emotions of the people, them being tired of this cultural separation between the white and the black people. The people were tired of being separated, so they thought that a change, if Mandela would be elected as president, would change the way they're living. So that's why their emotions led them to this change. And the counterclaim would be that Mandela's election was not aided in any way by the emotions of the country's population. Because the people, if we said that the people were tired of being so separated all the time and having to go to different areas for the same thing, as the white people could go to one place, but the black people had to go to another place, they could have not had any other solution than go and elect Mandela as their president and hope that this would lead for a better future. So as a conclusion, we can say that the apartheid heavily affected the views we have today on racism. It has forever changed our point of view. We have seen that during the apartheid, there was a very large separation of the white people and the black people. And for many years, the black people were used as slaves, and not only in South Africa, but in many other countries. And we can see that this is not right for the human rights, as every person can have the right to have their own life and do what they want to do. And this example of the apartheid has showed us how bad it could be and how not right for some people it is. Then the second, we can say also that this is not the case for all countries, as not all countries have gone through what South Africa has, but it has impacted many more people than just South Africans and the people living there. It has affected the whole world, as this event is so important. This event was very important, and it has given us a lesson that us as humans, we can't separate ourselves into two groups of white and black people. We need to coexist, and that people have different skin colors is only because of evolution and because of them being adapted to where they live. So humans are humans, and they should live and coexist together. And historical events change the way we think about subjects such as racism. And yet again, this example has showed us how bad things could be and how we can change these things. And for example, when Nelson Mandela was elected president, he has changed in many ways South Africa to make it a better country, and also changed our points of views on racism. Thank you for listening.